He stopped to help a crying child on a dark highway when everyone else drove past, and the town branded him a predator. But when he bought an abandoned diner for $1,200 and found the secret room hidden beneath its floors, what Marcus discovered didn't just clear his name. It exposed a 70-year-old lie that would shake the entire community to its core. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The rain came down in sheets that October night, turning Highway 41 into a river of blurred headlights and brake lights. Marcus Webb gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup, squinting through the windshield as his wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour. He was tired, bone tired. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your shoulders after 10 hours under car hoods, breathing in oil and exhaust, trying to squeeze enough money from brake jobs and oil changes to keep the lights on at home. He was 38 years old, though he felt closer to 50 most days. His hands were permanently stained with grease, calluses built up from years of turning wrenches. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had died suddenly. An aneurysm. She was laughing one moment at something their son had said, and gone the next. Just like that. No warning. No goodbye. Now it was just Marcus and 12-year-old Ethan, fumbling their way through life in the small Montana town of Ridgewood, population 3,200 and dropping every year. The garage Marcus ran, Webb's Auto Repair, sat on the edge of town in a building his grandfather had built back in 1967. Business had been slow lately, real slow. The big chains in the next town over offered cheaper prices, faster service. Marcus couldn't compete with that. He could only offer honesty and quality work, and in this economy, that didn't always pay the bills. His mind was on Ethan as he drove. His son had come home from school that afternoon with a black eye, trying to hide it under his hood. Some kid had called him names, pushed him in the hallway. Ethan wouldn't say why, just shrugged and said it didn't matter. But Marcus knew it mattered. Everything mattered when you were 12 and trying to figure out how to be a man without a mother to balance out the rough edges. The radio crackled with static, some country song fading in and out. Marcus reached to change the station when something caught his eye. A small figure on the side of the road, just past the bend near Miller's Creek. He almost missed it in the rain, just a flash of color against the gray. He slowed down, peering through the water streaming down his window. There. A child. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing alone in the rain beside what looked like a broken-down van. She was crying, her small hands covering her face, her pink jacket soaked through. Marcus's heart lurched. He checked his rearview mirror. Cars behind him sped past without slowing, their red taillights disappearing into the storm. Nobody else was stopping. He pulled onto the shoulder, threw the truck into park, and grabbed his rain jacket from behind the seat. The moment he stepped out, the rain hit him like a wall. He jogged toward the little girl, holding his jacket over his head. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up at him, her face streaked with tears and rain. Her brown eyes were wide with fear. She pointed to the van, its hood propped open, steam rising into the night air. "My daddy," she whimpered. "The car stopped and he went to find help and Mummy's crying and I'm scared." Marcus knelt down, staying a respectful distance. "It's okay. You're safe. Let me check on your mom, all right? What's your name?" "Emma," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Okay, Emma. I'm Marcus. I fix cars for a living. Let's get you back inside where it's dry." He walked with her to the van, knocked on the window. Inside, a woman in her 30s sat in the passenger seat, phone pressed to her ear, mascara running down her face. When she saw Marcus, her eyes went wide. She ended her call immediately and cracked the window an inch. "Who are you?" she demanded, pulling Emma closer through the sliding door. "Emma, get in here right now." "Mom, I'm just trying to help," Marcus said, holding up his hands. "I saw your daughter standing in the rain. Name's Marcus. I run the auto shop in Ridgewood, about 15 miles up. What happened?" The woman studied him suspiciously, clutching Emma tight. "The engine overheated. My husband walked to find cell service. We're waiting for a tow. I can take a look if you want, Marcus offered. Might be something simple. Could save you a tow fee. Before she could answer, headlights appeared, bright and blinding. A black Lexus SUV pulled up behind the van, and two men stepped out. The first was tall, mid-40s, wearing an expensive rain jacket. The second was older, silver-haired, carrying himself with the kind of authority that came from money. "Vanessa!" the tall man shouted, running to the van. "Are you okay? Is Emma safe?" "We're fine, Richard," the woman called back. "This man was just—" "Who the hell are you?" Richard turned to Marcus, his face hard. "What are you doing with my daughter?" Marcus took a step back. She was standing alone in the rain, crying. "I stopped to help. I'm a mechanic. I offered to look at your engine." The silver-haired man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he took in Marcus's grease-stained work clothes, his worn boots, his calloused hands. "In this day and age, you approach a child you don't know." His voice was cold, calculated. "What kind of man does that?" "The kind who doesn't drive past a scared little girl in a storm," Marcus said evenly. Richard pulled out his phone and took Marcus's picture. "I'm documenting this. What's your name? Where do you live?" "Richard, stop," Vanessa said from the van, but her voice was uncertain. "No," Richard said. "This is exactly the kind of thing you see on the news. Strange man approaches child on isolated road." He looked Marcus up and down with disgust. "We don't need your help. Leave, now." The silver-haired man, clearly Richard's father from the resemblance, crossed his arms. "Before you go, we'll need your information, for safety purposes." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. "I was trying to help your family." "That's what they all say," the older man replied. "Richard, call the sheriff. Let's have this documented properly." "That's not necessary," Marcus said, his jaw tight. "I'm leaving." He walked back to his truck through the rain, feeling their eyes burning into his back. As he climbed in and pulled away, he caught sight of Richard still filming him with his phone. Emma's small face was pressed against the van window, watching him go. Marcus's hands shook on the steering wheel as he drove home. He'd done the right thing. He knew he had. But something about the way they'd looked at him, the disgust, the suspicion, the immediate assumption of guilt, it made his stomach turn. He didn't know it then, but his photograph was already being uploaded to social media. By the time he pulled into his driveway 20 minutes later, his face was being shared across Ridgewood's community Facebook page with a caption that would change everything. "Strange man approached my daughter on Highway 41 tonight. Claimed to be helping. Be careful out there. Does anyone know who this is?" Marcus walked into his small house, a two-bedroom ranch that always felt too quiet since Sarah died. Ethan was on the couch, gaming headset on, shouting instructions to someone online. He pulled the headset off when he saw his dad. "Hey," Ethan said. "You're late." "Sorry, bud. Got held up." Marcus hung his wet jacket by the door. "You eat?" "Pizza rolls." "That's not dinner." Ethan shrugged. "It's food." Marcus was too tired to argue. He microwaved leftover spaghetti and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while he ate. That's when he saw it. The post. His face, grainy but unmistakable, with over 200 shares and counting. The comments made his blood run cold. "I know him. That's Marcus Webb. Runs the garage on Pine Street. Always thought there was something off about that guy. Didn't his wife die? Maybe we should be asking questions about that too." "Someone needs to warn people, especially those with kids." Marcus set his phone down, his appetite gone. His hands trembled. This couldn't be happening. He'd stopped to help a child, that's all. Just basic human decency. But in the court of public opinion, decency didn't matter. Perception did. And right now, the perception was that Marcus Webb was dangerous. Over the next 3 days, that perception hardened into something uglier. Marcus arrived at his garage Monday morning to find the word "creep" spray-painted across the bay door in red letters. His appointments for the week cancelled one by one. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been bringing her Buick to him for 12 years, left a voicemail saying she'd found another mechanic. No explanation needed. At the grocery store, mothers pulled their children closer when Marcus walked past. At the gas station, Conversations stopped when he entered. The sheriff, a decent man named Tom Dalton, stopped by the garage on Wednesday. "Marcus," Tom said, his tone apologetic, "I got to ask you about Saturday night." "I stopped to help a kid who was crying in the rain," Marcus said flatly. "That's it." "I know. I believe you. The family didn't file a report, and honestly, they came across pretty paranoid in their statement. But people are talking, and I wanted to hear your side officially." Marcus told him everything. Tom nodded, took notes, and shook his hand when he left. "Keep your head down," he advised. "This'll blow over." But it didn't blow over. It metastasized. Ethan came home from school on Thursday with another black eye, this one worse than before. He'd gotten into a fight with 3 boys who'd called Marcus a predator. The school called. The principal, a woman named Gloria, who'd gone to high school with Sarah, spoke in that carefully neutral tone administrators use when they're trying to avoid lawsuits. "Ethan started the altercation," she said. "He threw the first punch." "After they said, 'What about me?'" Marcus asked. A pause. "I can't control what students say outside of my earshot, Marcus, but violence is violence. Ethan's suspended for 3 days. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. His son stared at the ceiling, jaw clenched in that way that reminded Marcus so much of Sarah. "You didn't have to fight them," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, I did." Ethan's voice cracked. "They said you were a creep. They said you probably hurt that girl. I couldn't just let them say that." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry this is happening." "Why?" Ethan turned to look at him, eyes red. "You didn't do anything wrong. You helped someone. Since when is that a crime?" "It's not. But sometimes people don't care about the truth. They care about the story." "Then we need a better story." Marcus squeezed his son's shoulder and left the room before the tears came. He stood in the hallway, fists clenched, and made a decision. He wasn't going to hide. He wasn't going to run. But he needed something to change, some way forward that wasn't this slow suffocation of whispers and accusations. The answer came 2 weeks later in the form of a faded flyer tacked to the bulletin board at Jensen's Hardware. Marcus had stopped in for brake fluid, avoiding eye contact with the other customers who pretended not to see him. As he waited in line, his eyes wandered to the community board: estate sales, babysitting services, firewood for sale. And one listing that made him stop. Property auction, county tax sale. Old Riverside Diner, Highway 41, abandoned since 1978. Minimum bid $1,000, sale date November 5th. Marcus stared at the listing. The Riverside Diner. He knew the place. Everyone in Ridgewood did. It sat about 8 miles outside town. A relic from the 1950s with stone walls and a flat roof, surrounded by overgrown grass and broken asphalt. The story went that the owner had abandoned it overnight back in the late 70s. Nobody knew why. Nobody cared enough to ask. It had sat empty ever since, slowly being reclaimed by the Montana wilderness. Marcus pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the flyer. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate, but an idea nonetheless. What if he bought it? The garage was dying anyway. His reputation in Ridgewood was destroyed. Maybe a fresh start was what he needed. He could convert the diner into a new shop, bigger space, away from the whispers. It was stupid. It was risky. It was probably going to fail, but at least it was forward motion. That evening, Marcus drove out to see the property. He pulled off Highway 41 onto the cracked remains of what had once been a parking lot. The Riverside Diner loomed in the fading light, a squat stone building with boarded windows and a rusted sign still hanging by one chain. The words, Riverside Diner, Eston 1952, were barely visible under decades of weathering. He got out and walked the perimeter. The structure was solid, surprisingly so. Stone didn't rot like wood. The roof had some damage, but the bones were good. He peered through gaps in the boards covering the windows. Inside, he could make out the ghostly shapes of booths and a long counter. Behind the main building, he found something interesting. A second structure, smaller, built into the hillside. It looked like it might have been storage or a root cellar. The door was chained shut, the metal orange with rust. As he stood there in the dying light, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Possibility. The auction was held at the county courthouse the following Thursday. Marcus took the morning off, leaving a note on the garage door that said, "Back at noon." Not that anyone was likely to stop by. The courthouse steps were crowded with people holding numbered paddles, most of them investors or developers looking for cheap properties to flip. Marcus registered, paid his $20 participation fee, and received paddle number 47. When the Riverside Diner came up, the auctioneer rattled off the details in a bored monotone. Lot 17, Old Riverside Diner, Highway 41, 4.3 acres, structure built 1952, abandoned 1978, sold as is, minimum bid $1,000. "1,000?" Marcus called out, raising his paddle. The auctioneer nodded. "We have 1,000. Do I hear 1,100? Silence. People looked at Marcus like he was crazy. One woman actually laughed. Going once at 1,000, going twice. The gavel came down. Sold to paddle 47 for $1,000. Marcus felt his heart race. He'd actually done it. The woman next to him leaned over. "You know that place is worthless, right? The land's not even zoned for commercial use anymore." "Thanks for the tip," Marcus said. After signing the paperwork and writing a check for $1,200 total with fees, Marcus became the owner of the Riverside Diner. He sat in his truck in the courthouse parking lot, staring at the deed with his name on it, and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you bought the old diner. What are you planning to do? Lure kids there? This town is watching you." Marcus deleted it and drove home. That night at dinner, he told Ethan about the purchase. His son looked up from his mac and cheese, confused. "You bought the creepy old diner on the highway. Why?" "Because we need a fresh start," Marcus said. "The garage here is dead. I'm thinking maybe I convert the diner into a new shop, bigger space. We could even live there if we fix it up. Get out of this town." "Dad, that place has been abandoned since like the dinosaurs." 1978, actually. "Same thing." Ethan pushed his food around. "What if it doesn't work? Then we're no worse off than we are now." Ethan considered this. "Can I help?" Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "Yeah, bud. I could use the help." The next Saturday, they drove out together. Marcus brought his toolbox, a crowbar, and a battery-powered lantern. Ethan brought his skateboard and a backpack full of energy drinks. They stood in front of the building together, father and son, staring up at 40-plus years of neglect. "It's bigger than I thought," Ethan said. "Good bones," Marcus replied, echoing what his grandfather used to say about anything worth saving. They started with the front door. The lock had rusted through, and one good hit with the crowbar popped it open. The door swung inward with a groan that sounded almost alive. Stale air rushed out, carrying the smell of dust and time and something else, something older. Inside, the diner was frozen in time. Booths still lined the walls, their vinyl cracked and faded. The counter stretched along the back, stools still bolted to the floor. A jukebox stood silent in the corner. The floor was surprisingly intact. Black and white checkered tiles covered in decades of dust and dead leaves that had blown through gaps in the boards. "This is actually kind of cool," Ethan said, his voice echoing. Marcus walked behind the counter. The kitchen area was through a swinging door, industrial stove, prep stations, all untouched. "Someone left in a hurry," he muttered. "What do you mean?" "Look," Marcus pointed. "Dishes still in the drying rack, menus still on the tables. It's like everyone just walked away mid-shift." They explored for an hour, documenting everything with Marcus's phone. The main dining area, the kitchen, a small office with filing cabinets still full of yellowed papers, a storage room with canned goods that had expired before Ethan was born. Then Marcus noticed something odd. The back wall of the storage room didn't match the others. The stones were set differently, and there was a faint seam running floor to ceiling. "Hand me the flashlight," he told Ethan. He ran his fingers along the seam. It was definitely a different section of wall. He pushed. Nothing. He pushed harder. Still nothing. Maybe it's just the way it's built, Ethan suggested. But Marcus had spent his whole life taking things apart and putting them back together. He knew when something didn't fit right. This wall was wrong. He could feel it. Let's keep looking around, he said. We'll come back to this. They moved to the exterior, checking the foundation, the roof access, the utilities. Everything was surprisingly intact for a building that had been empty for 45 years. Someone had built this place to last. When they reached the smaller structure built into the hillside behind the main building, Marcus examined the chain on the door. It was heavy gauge, the kind you'd use to secure something valuable. Why would someone chain a storage shed? Ethan asked. Good question. Marcus tried the crowbar, but the chain was too thick. He'd need bolt cutters. They added it to the list. As the sun started to set, they packed up to leave. Marcus took one last look at the building, his building, and felt that strange pull again, like there was something here waiting to be found. On the drive home, Ethan was quiet until they hit the main road. Dad? Yeah? Do you think it's weird that nobody wanted to buy it? Little bit. And doesn't it seem strange that everything's still inside? Like, wouldn't someone have broken in and stolen stuff by now? Marcus hadn't thought about that. You're right. That is weird. Maybe people think it's haunted or something. You believe in ghosts? Ethan shrugged. I believe in things that don't make sense. And this doesn't make sense. That night, Marcus lay in bed, unable to sleep. His mind kept going back to that wall in the storage room, to the chained structure out back, to the feeling that the Riverside Diner was more than just an abandoned building. He pulled out his phone and started searching. Riverside Diner, Ridgewood, Montana history. A few results came up, mostly just mentions in old business directories. Then he found something interesting. A newspaper archive from the Ridgewood Gazette, dated November 1953. The headline made his breath catch. Local diner owner shelters dozens during historic flood. Marcus sat up and started reading. In late October of 1953, a massive storm system had stalled over central Montana, dumping record rainfall. The Yellowstone River flooded catastrophically. Entire towns were evacuated, bridges washed out, and according to the article, a man named William Reed, owner of the Riverside Diner, had sheltered over 60 people for nearly a week. Mr. Reed opened his establishment to families displaced by the flooding, the article read. Many credit him with saving lives, particularly children who had nowhere else to go. Marcus kept searching. He found more articles from 1953 and 54. William Reed was mentioned several times, always positively. He'd apparently used the diner as a makeshift shelter and community center during the disaster recovery. Then the article stopped. Nothing after March of 1954. Marcus searched for William Reed's obituary. Nothing. No death certificate. No records after 54. It was like he'd simply disappeared. Marcus put his phone down and stared at the ceiling. The diner had a history, a story, and somehow he knew he'd just scratched the surface. Monday morning, Marcus went to the county records office. The clerk, a heavy-set woman named Doris, regarded him with the same suspicious look everyone in town had been giving him lately. I need property records for the Riverside Diner, Marcus said. And any permits or documents filed by the original owner, William Reed. Doris typed slowly, her eyes on the screen. That's County Lot 417, correct? Yes, ma'am. She printed several pages and slid them across the counter. That'll be 50 cents per page. Marcus paid and sat on a bench outside to read through them. The property had been purchased in 1951 by William Reed. He'd filed for a business license in 1952. Permits for construction, health inspections, all clean. Then, in 1955, the property had been seized by the county for unpaid taxes. No forwarding address for William Reed, no estate claim. The property had sat in county possession until 1978, when it was sold at auction to a holding company. That company had gone bankrupt in 1982, and the property reverted to county control again. Marcus flipped to the last page and found something that made his pulse quicken. A note in the margin, handwritten, dated April 1955. Property investigation pending. Sheriff's report filed. Do not release. A sheriff's report from 1955. Marcus went back inside. Doris, is there any way to access old sheriff's reports from the 50s? She looked up over her reading glasses. Those would be in the archive basement. Nobody's been down there in years. You'd need sheriff approval. Can you call Sheriff Dalton? She sighed heavily but picked up the phone. 20 minutes later, Tom Dalton arrived, looking tired. Marcus, heard you bought the old diner. I did. I'm researching its history and found a reference to a sheriff's report from 55. I'd like to see it. Tom studied him. Why? Because I own the property now, and I think there's something people aren't telling me. Tom considered this, then nodded. All right, let's go look. The basement archive was exactly what you'd expect. Dusty, dimly lit, filled with metal shelves overflowing with boxes and file cabinets. Everything was organized by decade. They found the 1950s section in the back. What year? Tom asked. 55. April, maybe. They pulled boxes until they found the right one. Tom flipped through incident reports until he stopped on one file, thicker than the others. Here, he said, pulling it out. William Reed, filed April 7th, 1955. Marcus's hands shook slightly as Tom opened it. Inside were dozens of pages. Statements, photos, interview notes. The first page was the initial report. Suspect William Reed investigated for suspected child endangerment and kidnapping. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. What? Tom read further, his brow furrowing. Says here multiple children were found living at the diner in March of 55. Parents claimed Reed had kept their kids without permission. He was accused of operating an illegal shelter. Tom flipped pages. Jesus, they really went after this guy. What happened to him? Doesn't say. The case was... Tom squinted. Dismissed? No, not dismissed. Dropped. No charges filed. Reed left town voluntarily. He looked at Marcus. This is sealed, by the way. I shouldn't even be showing you this. Why is it sealed? Usually means someone with influence wanted it buried. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Can I get copies? No. Tom closed the file. But I'll tell you this much. Your diner has a complicated history. William Reed was either a very good man or a very dangerous one, and this town decided which story they wanted to believe. Which one did they choose? Tom put the file back in the box. The one that let them sleep at night. That evening, Marcus couldn't focus on anything. His mind kept circling back to William Reed, to the children allegedly found at the diner, to the sealed sheriff's report. He made a decision. Tomorrow, he was going back to the diner with bolt cutters. He was going to open that chained room. And he was going to find out what really happened in 55. Because Marcus Webb understood something now. He and William Reed weren't so different. Both men had been accused of something terrible simply for trying to help. Both had been judged without trial, and both had secrets people wanted to stay buried. The difference was, Marcus had the chance to uncover the truth. He just had to be brave enough to open the right door. Marcus stood in the hardware aisle of Jensen's the next morning, bolt cutters in one hand and a heavy-duty flashlight in the other. The cashier, a kid named Tyler, who couldn't have been more than 19, rang him up without making eye contact. Marcus had gotten used to that. $42.50, Tyler mumbled. Marcus handed him cash and left without waiting for change. Outside, the November air bit at his face. Winter was coming early this year. He could smell snow in the wind, that metallic coldness that meant the first storm was maybe a week away. Ethan was waiting in the truck, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. He pulled them out when Marcus climbed in. Got everything? Yeah. Marcus tossed the bolt cutters in the back. You sure you want to come? It's Saturday? You could hang out with friends. Ethan's jaw tightened. What friends, Dad? Nobody talks to me anymore except to say crap about you. Marcus felt that familiar ache in his chest. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Let's just go see what's in that room. They drove in silence, the Montana landscape rolling past in shades of brown and gray. The trees had already lost their leaves, standing skeletal against the overcast sky. When they turned onto Highway 41, Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was the same stretch of road where everything had started, where he'd stopped to help Emma, where his life had begun its slow unraveling. The Riverside Diner appeared around the bend, looking more desolate in the flat morning light. Marcus pulled into the gravel lot and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. You ever get the feeling you're about to find something you can't unfind? Ethan asked quietly. Every day of my life, Marcus replied. They walked around to the back of the building where the small structure jutted from the hillside. Up close, Marcus could see it was built differently than the main diner. The stones were darker, older maybe, and the single door was solid steel, not wood. The chain looped through the handle was thick as Marcus's wrist, secured with a padlock that had rusted into a solid mass. Marcus positioned the bolt cutters and squeezed. Nothing. He adjusted his grip and threw his full weight into it. The handles bit into his palms. Still nothing. Let me try, Ethan said. Together they gripped the handles and pulled. Marcus felt something give. Then, with a sharp crack that echoed across the empty land, the chain snapped. The loose ends clattered against the door like bones. Marcus pulled the chain free and let it fall to the ground. His hands were shaking. He grabbed the door handle, cold and rough with rust, and pulled. The door opened with a sound like a breath being released, a long exhale that had been held for decades. Cold air rushed out, colder than it should have been, carrying that same old smell from the main building but stronger. Dust and time and something else, something that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand up. You got the flashlight? Ethan whispered. Marcus clicked it on and pointed it into the darkness. A stairway descended into the earth, concrete steps leading down into nothing. The walls on either side were the same dark stone as the exterior, damp with condensation. This isn't a storage shed, Marcus said. It's a cellar, maybe a bunker. From the Cold War? Maybe. Lots of people built them in the 50s, scared of nuclear war. They started down. Marcus counted the steps. 10, 15, 20. The temperature dropped with each one. At the bottom, the flashlight beam revealed a heavy door, this one wooden with iron hinges. Marcus pushed it open. The room beyond was larger than he'd expected, maybe 30 feet square with a low ceiling supported by wooden beams, and it was full. Not full of supplies or canned goods or the usual shelter provisions, full of children's things. Marcus swept the flashlight slowly across the space. Dozens of small cots lined the walls, their metal frames spotted with rust but still standing. Blankets, faded and moth-eaten, lay folded at the foot of each one. Between the cots were wooden crates stacked carefully, labeled in neat handwriting. Clothes, girls age 5 to 10. Shoes, various. Toys and books. Dad, Ethan breathed, what is this place? Marcus stepped further in, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. The walls, he realized, were covered with something. He moved closer, angling the light. Drawings. Hundreds of them. Children's drawings in crayon and pencil. Some faded almost to nothing, others still vibrant. Houses with smoking chimneys. Stick figure families holding hands. Dogs and cats and horses. One wall had names written in careful print, dozens of them, with dates beside each. Sarah M., October 1953. Tommy K., November 1953. Emma R., December 1953. Marcus's heart was pounding. Emma. That was the same name as the little girl he'd helped. Could it be? He moved to another wall where someone had tacked up photographs, old black and white prints curling at the edges. Children's faces stared out at him, serious and solemn in that way people looked in old photos. Groups of kids sitting on the diner's front steps, a man in an apron standing with his arm around a young boy, more names written beneath in the same careful handwriting. This was a shelter, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. William Reed. He sheltered children here. During the flood, Ethan added, like the article said. But there was more. In the corner sat an old wooden desk, and on it, preserved under a sheet of glass, was a leather-bound book. Marcus approached it slowly, almost reverently. He lifted the glass and opened the book. The first page read, "Registry of Children, Riverside Emergency Shelter, William Reed, Proprietor." Below that, in columns, name, age, date of arrival, parent, guardian status, date of departure, Marcus flipped through the pages, his hands trembling. 47 names in total. Some entries had "Parents deceased, flood" written in the status column. Others said "Parents hospitalized" or "Whereabouts unknown." A few simply said "orphaned." Each child had stayed anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months. The dates ranged from October 1953 through March 1955. "He kept them safe," Marcus said, "for over a year, all these kids." Ethan was examining the drawings. "Look at this one." He pointed to a large piece of paper tacked to the wall. It showed the diner with sunshine and flowers, and written across the top in a child's handwriting, "Thank you, Mr. Reed, for saving us. You are a hero." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This wasn't the room of a kidnapper. This was the room of a man who'd given everything to protect children nobody else would take. Children whose parents were dead or missing or unable to care for them in the chaos after the flood. He turned back to the registry. Near the end, one entry caught his eye. Emma Rose Reed, age 4, October 1953, status daughter. Marcus stopped breathing. Daughter. William Reed had a daughter. A little girl who'd been here during the shelter operation. He flipped to the final page where someone had written a note in different handwriting, shakier, more desperate. "To whoever finds this, my father, William Reed, was not a criminal. He was a good man who helped children when no one else would. They accused him of terrible things because they didn't understand, because people were afraid. He died with his name ruined, and I've spent my whole life trying to clear it. If you're reading this, please tell the truth. Please let people know what really happened here." Emma Rose Reed, April 1978, 1978, the year the diner was finally abandoned. "Emma came back," Marcus said aloud. "William's daughter. She came back and sealed this room to preserve it." "But why?" Ethan asked. "Why not just show people?" "Because they didn't want to see." Marcus looked around the room again. The sheriff's report said William was investigated for kidnapping. They found children living here and assumed the worst. Never mind that there was a disaster. Never mind that these kids had nowhere else to go. They saw what they wanted to see. He thought about his own situation, about the photo of him on social media, about the assumptions and accusations. Nothing had changed in 70 years. People still saw what they wanted to see. Marcus spent the next hour documenting everything. He photographed the drawings, the names on the walls, every page of the registry. Ethan found boxes of letters, yellowed and fragile, from children to their parents or from William Reed to various authorities trying to get help for the displaced families. One letter, dated December 1953, was from William to the governor. "Sir, I am currently sheltering 23 children whose parents were killed or displaced by the October floods. I have requested assistance from county services multiple times with no response. These children need proper placement, medical care and counseling. I am doing what I can with limited resources, but this is beyond one man's capability. Please, I beg you, send help." There was no record of a response. Another letter, this one from January 1954, was addressed to a child welfare agency in Helena. "I write again to request placement services for the children in my care. Many have been here for 3 months now. While I am grateful to provide shelter, these children deserve permanent homes with families who can properly care for them. I fear my continued housing of them without official approval may bring legal consequences, but I cannot turn them away when they have nowhere else to go." Marcus understood now. William Reed had been trapped. He couldn't abandon the children, but he also couldn't get official help. So he'd done what he thought was right and paid for it with his reputation. In the bottom of one crate, Marcus found newspaper clippings. He spread them on the desk carefully. The first was from March 1955. Local man investigated for child endangerment. William Reed, owner of the Riverside Diner, is under investigation by county sheriff for allegedly keeping multiple children at his establishment without parental consent. Parents claim Reed refused to return their children. Reed maintains he was providing emergency shelter. Investigation ongoing. The next article, April 1955. Diner owner flees town. William Reed has left Ridgewood amid ongoing investigation. Children previously in his care have been returned to families or placed in foster care. Sheriff's office will not pursue charges but warns public to be cautious. And finally, a small obituary from September 1955 from a newspaper in North Dakota. William James Reed, age 48, died September 7th in Fargo, North Dakota. Cause of death ruled as heart failure. Survived by daughter Emma Rose Reed, age 6. Services private. Marcus sat down hard on one of the old cots. William Reed had died alone, disgraced, 6 months after leaving Ridgewood, and his daughter had spent her entire life knowing her father was a hero, but being unable to prove it. "This is insane," Ethan said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. "They destroyed this guy for helping kids." "And then forgot about him," Marcus added. "Buried the truth so deep nobody even knew this room existed." He looked at the registry again, at the 47 names. 47 children who'd been kept alive, warm and safe when the world was falling apart around them. 47 lives saved by a man nobody remembered. And then Marcus saw it. Third page, halfway down. Emma Rose Whitmore, age 5, November 1953. Status: parents deceased, flood. Departed March 1954. Whitmore, Emma Whitmore. Marcus's blood ran cold. Whitmore was the last name of the family on the highway. Richard Whitmore, Vanessa Whitmore, their daughter Emma. The little girl he'd tried to help was the great-great-granddaughter of a child William Reed had saved, and they had no idea. What happens next will turn everything upside down, reveal a truth this town has buried for 70 years, and prove that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones history forgets. If you're enjoying this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus sat in his truck outside the diner, phone in hand, staring at the Whitmore family's social media profiles. Richard Whitmore was some kind of regional manager for a medical supply company. His father, the silver-haired man from the highway, was Gerald Whitmore, former town councilman, current president of the Ridgewood Historical Society. The irony was almost funny. The man who'd accused Marcus of being a predator was on the board of a historical society that had completely erased William Reed's heroism from the record. Marcus scrolled through Gerald's posts. Photos from historical society meetings, fundraisers for the Ridgewood Museum, complaints about young people not respecting local history. And then, buried in photos from 3 years ago, Marcus found something that made his breath catch. A post from Gerald reading, "Looking for information on my grandmother, Emma Rose Whitmore, born 1948, raised in foster care after her parents died in the 53 floods. Family history is important. Anyone with info, please contact me." So Gerald knew his grandmother had been orphaned in the floods. He just didn't know who'd saved her, who'd kept her alive long enough to grow up and have children and grandchildren. Marcus took a screenshot and closed his eyes. The universe had a sick sense of humor. "What are you going to do?" Ethan asked from the passenger seat. "I don't know yet." "You have to tell them, right? I mean, their family literally owes their existence to the guy they helped destroy." "They didn't destroy him. That was 70 years ago." "But they're doing the same thing to you," Ethan said quietly, assuming the worst, spreading rumors, not caring about the truth. Marcus looked at his son. When had he gotten so wise? "You're right," Marcus said, "but I need more than just this room. I need proof that the accusations against William were false. I need to find out what really happened when the parents came to get their kids." "How?" "Same way I've been doing everything else. Dig until I find answers." Over the next week, Marcus became obsessed. Every spare moment was spent researching. He went back to the county records office, back to the newspaper archives, even drove to the state library in Helena to access records not available locally. He found the original complaint filed against William Reed. It had come from 3 sets of parents in March 1955, claiming William refused to return their children. But when Marcus dug deeper, he found something interesting. All three families had ties to Arthur Kemp, a local businessman who'd owned most of the property along the riverfront, property that had flooded, property that had been condemned and then quietly purchased by Kemp's development company for pennies on the dollar once families relocated. Marcus found a property survey from 1954 showing Kemp had bought 17 parcels of flood-damaged land. And in April 1955, the same month William Reed fled town, Kemp had filed permits to build what would become Ridgewood's largest commercial district. The pieces started fitting together. William Reed's diner sat on prime real estate along Highway 41. If Kemp could force Reed out, he could expand his development. What better way than to ruin him? Marcus found one more piece of evidence, a deposition from one of the children who'd stayed at the shelter. The girl, Helen Martinez, had been 9 years old in '53. In 1997, she'd filed a statement with the county as part of an estate claim, and in it, she'd mentioned her time at the Riverside shelter. "Mr. Reed never held us against our will," her statement read. "Some of us didn't want to leave because he was kind and we felt safe. When my aunt came to get me, I cried because I didn't want to go. Mr. Reed said I had to. That family was important. He never kept anyone who had somewhere else to be." Marcus made copies of everything. By Friday, he had a folder 3 inches thick with documents, photos, testimonies, and evidence. He also had a decision to make. He could keep this to himself, fix up the diner quietly, move on with his life. Nobody in Ridgewood cared about William Reed anymore. The man was long dead, his daughter was gone, and the truth wouldn't change anything. Or he could go public, show people what he'd found, clear William Reed's name, and maybe, just maybe, show the town what real injustice looked like. The problem was he knew how it would be received. The same people who'd shared his photo and called him a creep would just accuse him of being obsessed. They'd say he was projecting, trying to rewrite history to make himself look better, unless he had something undeniable. That's when Marcus remembered. Emma Rose Reed had written that note in 1978. She'd sealed the room to preserve it, which meant she might still be alive. He started searching. Emma Rose Reed, born 1949, daughter of William Reed. He found her in a public records database. Emma Rose Reed, married in 1971 to Thomas Hartley, became Emma Reed Hartley, and she was living in Billings, Montana, just 3 hours away. Marcus stared at the address on his screen. This was it. The daughter who'd spent her life trying to clear her father's name. She would have answers. She would have proof. He called the number listed. It rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice elderly but clear. "Hello? Mrs. Hartley? Emma Reed Hartley?" A pause. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Marcus Webb. I recently purchased the Riverside Diner in Ridgewood. I found the shelter room beneath it, and I found your note." Silence. Long enough that Marcus thought she'd hung up. Then, "You found it? After all these years?" "Yes, ma'am. I found the registry, the drawings, the letters, all of it." "Is it intact?" Her voice cracked. "Is it all still there?" "Every bit of it, perfectly preserved." He heard her crying softly. "I sealed that room in '78. I thought when I died, it would be lost forever. Nobody believed me when I told them what my father did. They said I was making it up, trying to protect a criminal." "Mrs. Hartley, I have evidence your father was innocent. Documents, testimonies, even proof that the accusations were part of a land grab scheme. I want to tell his story. I want people to know the truth." "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care about a man you never met?" Marcus took a breath. "Because I know what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do. To have people assume the worst because it's easier than seeking the truth. Your father was a hero, and I'm going to prove it." They talked for 2 hours. Emma told him everything. How her father had taken her to the diner every day, how she'd watched him care for the flood orphans with such tenderness, how he'd gone without sleep for days to make sure everyone was fed and warm, how he'd spent every penny he had on supplies. "When the accusations started, he didn't fight back," Emma said. "He could have. He had records, witnesses, proof, but he was tired, broken. He said the children were safe now, and that's all that mattered. He died believing the world thought he was a monster. I'm going to change that, Marcus promised. How? I'm going to show Ridgewood who your father really was, and I'm going to start with the family that owes him everything. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the darkness of his living room. Ethan had gone to bed hours ago. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind rattling the windows. He pulled out his phone and opened Facebook. Found Richard Whitmore's profile. Typed a message. Mr. Whitmore, my name is Marcus Webb. We met on Highway 41 when I helped your daughter. I've recently made a discovery about your family history that I think you should know about. Would you be willing to meet? He stared at the message for 5 full minutes before hitting send. The response came faster than expected. 2 hours later, at nearly midnight, Marcus's phone buzzed. I know who you are. I have no interest in meeting with you. Please do not contact my family again. Marcus wasn't surprised, just disappointed. He'd hoped maybe, just maybe, curiosity would override prejudice. Plan B, then. The next morning, Marcus called Sheriff Dalton. Tom, I need a favor. Marcus, I don't know if that's a good idea right now. I found something at the diner. Something that changes everything we know about William Reed. I need you to see it. There was a long pause. What kind of something? The kind that proves he was innocent. The kind that's going to turn this town upside down. Tom sighed. I'll be there in an hour. When the sheriff arrived, Marcus led him down into the shelter room. He watched Tom's face as the older man took it all in. The cots, the drawings, the registry, the letters. My God, Tom whispered. This was here the whole time. Sealed since '78. William Reed's daughter Emma preserved it before she left town. Marcus showed him everything. The registry with all 47 names. The letters to authorities begging for help. The timeline showing William had tried to get official assistance. The evidence of Arthur Kemp's land grab scheme. Tom sat at the old desk and read through it all, his expression growing darker by the minute. Do you know what this means? He finally said. That William Reed was innocent. No. That this town knowingly destroyed an innocent man. That people in power used the law to commit fraud. That we've been celebrating the wrong history for 70 years. Tom looked up at Marcus. This is going to piss off a lot of people. Good, Marcus said. People should be pissed off. What do you want to do? I want to open this to the public. Turn it into a memorial. Make sure everyone knows what really happened here. Make sure William Reed gets the recognition he deserves. Tom nodded slowly. You know the Whitmores are not going to like this. The Whitmores need to know this. Gerald Whitmore's grandmother is in that registry. Emma Rose Whitmore. She was 5 years old when William Reed saved her life. Tom's eyes widened. You're kidding. Page 3. Look for yourself. Tom flipped through the registry and found it. He let out a long breath. Gerald has no idea, does he? None. He's been trying to research his family history for years, posted about it on social media. He just doesn't know his grandmother's hero is the same man this town destroyed. You have to tell him. I tried. He won't meet with me. Thinks I'm some kind of predator, remember? Tom stood up, dusting off his pants. Then I'll tell him. This is too important to let pride get in the way. You think he'll believe you? He's going to have to, because this, Tom gestured around the room, this is proof. Real, documented, undeniable proof. And if Gerald Whitmore is half the historian he claims to be, he'll want the truth out there. Marcus wasn't so sure, but he let Tom take the lead. They spent another hour documenting everything officially, Tom taking photographs for the county record. As they climbed back up into the daylight, Tom paused. Marcus, you know this isn't going to fix your reputation overnight, right? People are still going to talk. I know, but maybe it'll make 1 or 2 of them think twice before they judge. And if I can do that while honoring a man who deserves it, that's enough. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Your wife would be proud of you. Marcus felt his eyes burn. Thanks, Tom. That afternoon, Tom called Gerald Whitmore and arranged a meeting. Marcus wasn't invited, but Tom promised to update him. While he waited, Marcus continued working on the diner. He'd decided to restore the main building to its 1950s glory, create a small museum space, and preserve the shelter room exactly as he'd found it. Ethan helped after school, sweeping floors and sorting through old supplies. They worked mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared purpose. Around 5 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. Tom. "How'd it go?" Marcus answered. "Gerald Whitmore just left my office. He's in shock. Did he believe you?" Marcus, he broke down crying. His grandmother died when he was 15. He never knew anything about her childhood, except that she'd been orphaned in the floods. When I showed him the registry, when he saw her name and realized William Reed had saved her, he lost it. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "What now?" "He wants to meet you, says he owes you an apology, a big one." "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the diner." Marcus hung up and stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. It was happening. The truth was finally coming out. He walked down into the shelter room one more time, standing in the center of all those names, all those stories. "We're going to make this right," he said to the empty room, to the ghost of William Reed, to Emma Rose wherever she was. "I promise." The next morning was cold and bright, frost glittering on the dead grass around the diner. Marcus arrived early, nervous energy making him pace. He'd cleaned up the main dining room, set up some folding chairs, laid out the copies of all his research on the counter. At 10 exactly, 3 vehicles pulled into the lot. Sheriff Dalton's cruiser, Gerald Whitmore's silver Mercedes, and a black sedan Marcus didn't recognize. Gerald stepped out first, and Marcus saw how much he'd aged in just 2 weeks. The man who'd stood on the highway radiating authority and contempt now looked smaller, uncertain. Richard Whitmore emerged from the sedan with his wife Vanessa and their daughter Emma. The little girl was holding her mother's hand, looking around with wide eyes. They all walked toward Marcus slowly. Gerald was the first to speak. "Mr. Webb," he said, his voice thick, "I owe you an apology. Several, in fact." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak yet. "I accused you of terrible things. I let fear and prejudice cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I did to you exactly what this town did to William Reed 70 years ago." Gerald's eyes were red-rimmed. "I'm sorry, deeply, truly sorry." Richard stepped forward. "So am I. I should have thanked you that night for helping Emma. Instead, I treated you like a criminal. There's no excuse for that." Vanessa was crying quietly. "We're so sorry." Little Emma looked up at Marcus. "Are you the man who fixed Daddy's car in the rain?" Marcus knelt down to her level. "I tried to help, yeah." "Thank you," she said simply. "Mummy said you were nice." Marcus felt his throat close up. He stood and gestured to the diner. "Would you like to see what I found?" He led them inside, down the stairs, into the shelter room. He watched their faces as they took it in, the same awe and sadness he'd felt that first day. Gerald went straight to the registry. Marcus had marked the page. Gerald's hands shook as he read his grandmother's entry. Emma Rose Whitmore, age 5, status, parents deceased. He touched the faded ink reverently. She was here. He saved her. For 4 months, Marcus said, kept her safe, fed, warm, made sure she was placed with a good foster family when the time came. "And we destroyed him," Gerald whispered. "Not you, the generation before, but yes, they destroyed him for doing the right thing." They spent an hour in that room. Gerald read every letter, looked at every photograph. Emma, the little girl, found a drawing on the wall of a house with flowers and asked if she could draw too. "Of course," Marcus said, handing her a pencil. She drew carefully on a blank spot of wall, a stick figure man helping a stick figure girl with a rainbow overhead. She wrote beneath it, "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Mr. Reed." When they finally emerged back into the daylight, Gerald turned to Marcus. "What are you planning to do with this?" "Turn it into a memorial. Make sure people know the truth about William Reed." honor the children he saved. "I want to help," Gerald said immediately. "The Historical Society, we have funds. We can support this. And I'll make sure every person in Ridgewood knows what really happened here." "There's someone else you should talk to first," Marcus said. "William's daughter, Emma Reed Hartley. She's still alive, living in Billings." Gerald's eyes widened. "His daughter is alive?" "She spent her whole life trying to clear her father's name. Nobody would listen. Maybe now they will." That afternoon, Marcus gave Gerald Emma Hartley's number. A week later, he learned they'd met. Emma had driven to Ridgewood for the first time in 45 years. Gerald had brought his entire family. They'd spent hours in the shelter room together, Emma telling stories about her father, Gerald crying as he learned about the man who'd saved his grandmother. Emma had given Gerald something precious. A photograph of William Reed holding Emma Rose Whitmore on his shoulders, both of them smiling, taken in 1954, just before Emma Rose was placed with her foster family. It was the last photograph Emma had of her father looking happy. The story broke in the Ridgewood Gazette 2 days before Thanksgiving. Hidden Room reveals hero, not criminal. William Reed's true story finally told. The article was front page, with photographs of the shelter room, the registry, and that picture of William and young Emma Rose. It detailed everything: the flood, the children, the false accusations, the land grab, the cover-up. And it mentioned Marcus, the mechanic who'd uncovered it all. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the story had been picked up by regional news, then state news, then national outlets. NPR did a piece, the History Channel called. Someone started a petition to have William Reed posthumously honored. But the response that mattered most to Marcus came from Ridgewood itself. People started showing up at his garage again, not to drop off cars, not at first, just to apologize. Mrs. Henderson came in tears, saying she should never have doubted him. The mothers who'd pulled their children away in the grocery store came with baked goods and red faces. Even Tyler from the hardware store shook his hand and said he was sorry for not standing up for him. Marcus accepted each apology with quiet grace. He didn't gloat. He didn't make them grovel. He just said thank you and moved on. Because he understood something they were just learning. Judgment comes easy. Truth takes work. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong. Ethan came home from school that week with something Marcus hadn't seen in months. A smile. 3 kids asked to sit with me at lunch today, he said. And Tyler Brennan apologized for calling you names. Said his mom made him, but still. Marcus pulled his son into a hug. It's getting better. Yeah, Ethan said. Yeah, it is. But the real turning point came on a Saturday morning in early December. Marcus was at the diner, working on refinishing the counter, when he heard vehicles pulling up outside. He stepped out to find not trucks or cars, but a small caravan. Gerald Whitmore's Mercedes, Sheriff Dalton's cruiser, and 6 other vehicles, all from Ridgewood. People got out, people Marcus recognized from town. The mayor, 2 council members, members of the Historical Society, and at least 20 volunteers carrying tools, paint, and supplies. Gerald walked up with a blueprint rolled under his arm. We took a vote, he said. The Historical Society Board unanimously agreed to fund the restoration of the Riverside Diner and the creation of the William Reed Memorial Shelter Museum. We want to help you finish this right. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, as people started unloading supplies and asking where to start. The mayor, a woman named Patricia Chen, shook his hand firmly. What you did here, Marcus, uncovering this truth, it reminded us what history is really about. Not the comfortable stories, but the real ones. Thank you. Over the next month, the diner transformed. Volunteers worked weekends and evenings. The main dining room was restored to 1950s specifications. The kitchen was updated, but kept its vintage charm. The shelter room was preserved exactly as found, encased in climate-controlled glass, so visitors could see it but not disturb it. Emma Hartley came for the work sessions, sharing stories about her father, bringing more photographs and letters. She and Gerald became close, bonded by their connection to that little girl in the registry. And slowly, carefully, Marcus Webb's reputation was restored too. Not because he demanded it, but because people saw his character through his actions. They saw how he honored William Reed without seeking glory for himself, how he worked alongside volunteers without resentment for how they'd treated him, how he focused on the truth rather than revenge. The grand opening was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day. A day about love seemed appropriate for a place built on love for children nobody else wanted. But there was still one more piece of the story Marcus hadn't figured out. The connection between Emma Whitmore, the little girl he'd helped, and Emma Rose Whitmore, the little girl William Reed had saved. He was about to discover it was no coincidence at all. 1 week before the scheduled grand opening, Marcus received a phone call that would answer the question that had been gnawing at him for months. It was Emma Hartley, William Reed's daughter. Her voice was excited, breathless in a way he hadn't heard before. "Marcus, I found something. In my father's papers. I need you to see it right away." "What is it?" "Just come to Billings, please. Today, if you can." Marcus made the 3-hour drive in 2.5, his mind racing the entire way. Ethan had stayed home, working on a school project, so Marcus drove alone with nothing but the radio and his thoughts. Emma Hartley lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Billings, the kind of place that spoke of a life lived simply but with care. She met him at the door, 83 years old, but moving with surprising energy. Come in, she said, ushering him to her dining room table, where papers were spread across every surface. "After the article came out," Emma explained, "I started going through everything I had of my father's, things I'd kept boxed up for decades, and I found this." She held up a leather journal, smaller than the registry, worn at the edges. His personal diary, from 1954 and 55. Marcus took it carefully. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed but intact. "Read the entry from March 7th, 1955, Emma said, her eyes bright. "Page 93. Marcus flipped through until he found it. The handwriting was the same as in the registry, careful and neat despite obvious emotional strain. "Today was the hardest day of my life since losing my wife. The Keller family came for their son James. He didn't want to go. He cried and clung to me, saying they'd abandoned him during the flood, that I was more of a father than they ever were. But I could not keep him. The law says he belongs with blood family, even if that family left him to die in rising water." 3 more families came. The Whitmore aunt for little Emma Rose. "The child has been my joy these past months, so bright and kind. She reminded me so much of my own Emma." I gave Mrs. Whitmore the few photographs I had of Emma Rose's parents, hoping it would give the child some connection to who she'd lost. But Mrs. Whitmore said something that chilled me. She said Mr. Kemp had told her I was dangerous, that I'd been keeping children illegally, that she should report me to the sheriff. I tried to explain, showed her the registry, the letters to authorities. She seemed uncertain but took Emma Rose anyway. "I fear this is the beginning of the end. Kemp wants this land. He's been pressuring me to sell for months. Now he's using the children, my acts of mercy, as a weapon against me." Marcus looked up at Emma Hartley. He knew it was a setup. "Keep reading," she said. March 23rd. Marcus found the page. "The sheriff came today with accusations. 3 families, all connected to Arthur Kemp through business or marriage, have filed complaints. They claim I held their children against their will, that I refused to release them to family. All lies. I have documentation proving I contacted every available relative, that I begged county services for help placing these children. But Kemp has influence, money. The sheriff seemed sympathetic but said his hands were tied. He advised me to leave Ridgewood before formal charges were filed. My Emma is only 6 years old. How can I fight this and care for her? How can I stay and watch my name be destroyed, knowing it will follow her all her life? I've decided to go. I'll take Emma and start over somewhere people don't know us, somewhere she can grow up without the shadow of her father's disgrace." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. He was forced out, run out of his own town for saving lives. "There's more," Emma said softly. April 2nd. The entry was shorter, the handwriting shakier. "We left Ridgewood last night. I sealed the shelter room before we went. Someday, perhaps, someone will find it. Someone will know the truth." I took the registry copies, the photographs, the letters, evidence of what really happened. But I left the room itself intact. Every drawing, every name on the wall, every small piece of those children's lives. It's their memorial, even if the world never sees it. Emma asked why we were leaving. I told her we were going on an adventure. She's too young to understand that sometimes the price of doing the right thing is losing everything you love. Marcus closed the journal, his throat tight. He gave up his entire life, his home, his business, his reputation, all because he did the right thing. And died believing the world thought he was a monster, Emma Hartley added, wiping her eyes. "But that's not why I called you here." She pulled out another document, this one more recent, printed on modern paper. "After we talked last month, I started researching the families in the registry, trying to find out what happened to the children my father saved." She spread out a family tree, hand-drawn but detailed. Emma Rose Whitmore was placed with her aunt, Margaret Whitmore, in April of '55. Margaret raised her. Emma Rose married in '67, had 3 children. One of those children was Robert Whitmore, born '68. Marcus's pulse quickened. Gerald's father. Exactly. Robert married Catherine Lang in '90. They had one son, Gerald Whitmore. Gerald married Patricia in 2012. They had one daughter in 2015. "Emma," Marcus breathed. Emma Hartley nodded. "The little girl you helped on the highway, the one whose family accused you of being a predator, is the great-great-granddaughter of the child my father saved, and she was named after her great-great-grandmother." The room seemed to tilt. Marcus sat down hard. "That's why she was on Highway 41, right near the diner." "I believe in Providence," Emma Hartley said quietly. "I believe my father sent you to that highway that night, to help his Emma's namesake, to start the chain of events that would finally clear his name." Marcus thought about that rainy night, about the impulse to stop when everyone else drove past, about the accusations that followed. If he hadn't stopped, he never would have been ostracized. He never would have needed to buy the diner for a fresh start. He never would have found the shelter room. "Your father orchestrated this whole thing from beyond the grave," Marcus said with something between a laugh and a sob. "He was always resourceful," Emma replied with a sad smile, "even in death." They spent another hour going through Emma's research. She'd found 12 of the 47 children from the registry, now elderly themselves, scattered across 6 states. She'd spoken with 3 of them on the phone. All remembered William Reed with reverence and gratitude. All had been horrified to learn what happened to him after they left. "They want to come," Emma said, "to the opening, to finally say thank you." Marcus drove back to Ridgewood in a daze. The enormity of what had happened, what was still happening, overwhelmed him. This wasn't just about clearing William Reed's name anymore. It was about healing a 70-year-old wound, about correcting a historical injustice, about proving that truth, no matter how long buried, could still matter. When he got home, Ethan was waiting up despite the late hour. "Well?" his son asked. Marcus told him everything. About the journal, about Emma Rose Whitmore's family tree, about the impossible coincidence that wasn't a coincidence at all. "So you were supposed to stop that night," Ethan said when Marcus finished. "Like destiny or whatever." "I don't know about destiny, but I know that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything in the moment, and sometimes it gives you everything back later." "Deep, Dad," Ethan said with a smile, but his eyes were serious. "You think William Reed knew, like somehow knew you'd find it all?" "I think he hoped, and hope is sometimes enough." The week before the opening became a blur of activity. Gerald Whitmore had arranged for a documentary crew to film the event. Emma Hartley was coming, bringing original photographs and documents. 7 of the survivors from the registry had confirmed they were attending, some traveling from as far as Oregon and Texas. The town was buzzing. The story had touched something deep in people, made them reconsider their own judgments and assumptions. Marcus found himself stopped constantly on the street. People wanting to shake his hand, to apologize again, to tell him they'd learned something from his example. But there was still tension. Arthur Kemp's descendants still lived in Ridgewood. His grandson, Arthur Kemp III, owned the largest construction company in the county. When he heard about the memorial and the documentary detailing his grandfather's role in destroying William Reed, he'd threatened legal action. "Let him sue," Gerald had said calmly. "We have documentation. Truth is an absolute defense." 3 days before the opening, Marcus was at the diner putting finishing touches on the exhibit when a black BMW pulled into the lot. Arthur Kemp III stepped out, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and an expression of barely controlled anger. Marcus met him at the door. "Mr. Kemp." "You've got some nerve," Kemp said without preamble. "Dragging my family's name through the mud with your fantasy story about some heroic diner owner." "It's not fantasy, it's documented fact. My grandfather was a respected businessman. He built this town, and you're trying to destroy his legacy with conspiracy theories." Marcus stayed calm. "Your grandfather ran William Reed out of town so he could steal his property. Then he bought up flood-damaged land from desperate families for almost nothing. It's all in the public record. Property transfers, business permits, everything." "Lies," Kemp spat, "and I'll prove it in court." "You're welcome to try, but before you do, there's something you should see." Marcus led Kemp down into the shelter room. He watched the man's face as he took in the drawings, the names, the registry, the overwhelming evidence of William Reed's compassion and sacrifice. "Your grandfather," Marcus said quietly, "destroyed a good man because that man stood on land Kemp wanted. 47 children are alive today, with children and grandchildren of their own, because William Reed chose mercy over profit. What did your grandfather build? What legacy did he really leave?" Kemp stared at the walls for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter. "My grandfather died when I was 8. I only knew him from stories. Everyone said he was brilliant, ambitious, that he built the Ridgewood commercial district from nothing. He built it on stolen land and broken lives," Marcus said. "I'm sorry if that's hard to hear, but it's the truth." Kemp turned away from the drawings. "This memorial, it's really happening?" "Yes." "And you're going to tell everyone what my grandfather did?" "We're going to tell the truth. How people interpret that is up to them." Kemp was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My daughter is 12, same age as Emma Rose Whitmore was when she went into foster care. I think about what she would need if something happened to me and her mother. Someone to keep her safe. Someone who'd sacrifice everything for her." He looked at Marcus. "I won't sue, and I won't make trouble, but I want my family's side told too. The donations my grandfather made, the jobs he created, the good he did along with the bad." Marcus nodded. "History is complicated. We can include that context." Kemp left without another word, but Marcus felt something shift. This wasn't about revenge or villainizing anyone. It was about truth, complete and complex. The night before the opening, Marcus couldn't sleep. He drove to the diner at 2 a.m. and sat in the restored dining room, everything polished and perfect, ready for tomorrow. He thought about Sarah, wondered what she'd think of all this. She'd always believed in doing right, regardless of cost. She'd have been proud, he thought. Or maybe she'd have told him he was crazy for buying a condemned building on impulse, probably both. His phone buzzed. A text from Gerald Whitmore. "Can't sleep either. Mind if I come by?" 20 minutes later, Gerald sat across from Marcus in one of the restored booths, both of them drinking coffee from a thermos Marcus kept in his truck. "I keep thinking about my grandmother," Gerald said. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. But before she went, she told me stories about being a little girl, about losing her parents in a flood, about being so scared and alone." He paused. "She said someone kind took care of her until her aunt came. A man who sang silly songs and let her help make pancakes. She said he made her feel safe when the whole world was falling apart. I always thought she was talking about a foster parent or a social worker." "It was William Reed," Marcus said. "I know that now. And I think part of her always knew we wouldn't believe her if she told us the truth, that her hero was the same man everyone called a criminal, so she kept it to herself. Died without ever being able to say his name out loud. Gerald's voice broke. I failed her. I could have researched, could have asked questions, could have demanded the real story. Instead, I just accepted what everyone said. Just like I accepted the worst about you without even trying to learn the truth. You're here now, Marcus said. That's what matters. Tomorrow, Gerald said, when we open those doors and show people what really happened, we're not just honoring William Reed. We're honoring my grandmother and every other child who was saved and every person who's ever been wrongly accused, including you. Marcus felt tears threatening. Thank you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky slowly lighten through the diner windows. Finally, Gerald said, Do you think he knows? William Reed? Wherever he is, do you think he knows we finally got it right? Marcus thought about the chain of impossible coincidences, about stopping on that highway, about finding this building, about every piece falling into place exactly when it needed to. Yeah, he said. I think he knows. The sun rose on February 14th, cold and bright. Marcus arrived at the diner at 7 a.m. to find a line already forming. News crews were setting up. Sheriff Dalton was directing parking. Emma Hartley stood near the entrance, wrapped in a heavy coat, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the restored building her father had built. Ethan came up beside Marcus, dressed in his best shirt. You ready, Dad? Ready as I'll ever be. At 10 a.m. exactly, Gerald Whitmore took the microphone set up outside the diner. Behind him stood the 7 survivors from the registry, now in their 70s and 80s, living proof of William Reed's heroism. 70 years ago, Gerald began, this town made a terrible mistake. We destroyed a good man's reputation because we chose fear over truth, assumption over investigation, convenience over justice. Today, we correct that mistake. He gestured to the diner. This building, the Riverside Diner and William Reed Memorial Shelter Museum, stands as a testament to one man's courage and compassion. William Reed saved 47 children during and after the Great Flood of 1953. He fed them, sheltered them, and kept them safe when no one else would. And we repaid him by running him out of town. Gerald's voice grew stronger. But truth has a way of surfacing. Thanks to Marcus Webb, who found the sealed shelter room and refused to let it stay hidden, we now know the real story. And we commit today that we will never again let fear silence truth or let good people be destroyed by lies. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus felt hands clapping his back, people surrounding him with gratitude and apologies he no longer needed. Emma Hartley cut the ribbon, her hands shaking, and the doors opened. People poured through, filling the restored diner, descending into the shelter room where they stood in reverent silence, reading names on walls, looking at children's drawings, understanding finally what had been lost and what was now at last reclaimed. Marcus stood to the side, watching. Ethan was with the survivors, recording their stories on his phone for a school project. Gerald was showing his daughter Emma the registry entry for her namesake. Emma Hartley was surrounded by reporters, finally able to tell her father's story to an audience ready to listen. And Marcus realized something profound. He'd been so focused on clearing William Reed's name that he'd missed the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the past. It was about the future, about teaching a new generation to question assumptions, to seek truth, to stand up for what's right even when it costs them everything. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you for not driving past my daughter, and thank you for not giving up. Richard Whitmore. Marcus smiled and put his phone away. He'd stopped for a crying child on a dark highway and lost everything. His reputation, his business, his peace. And in losing everything, he'd found something far greater. Purpose. The William Reed Memorial Shelter Museum became something Marcus never expected. A pilgrimage site. In the weeks following the grand opening, visitors came from across Montana, then from neighboring states, then from across the country. Families who'd lost loved ones in disasters, foster children seeking connection to history, historians documenting forgotten heroes, and ordinary people who just needed to believe goodness could prevail. Marcus found himself giving tours 3 days a week, telling William Reed's story over and over until it became as familiar as his own. Each time, he saw different faces react to different details. Parents wept at the letters William had written begging for help. Veterans stood straighter when they read about his refusal to abandon the children, and children, always the children, pressed their small hands against the glass enclosure of the shelter room, staring at the drawings on the walls with wonder. One Tuesday afternoon in late March, Marcus was closing up when a woman in her 70s approached him. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that seemed to look straight through him. "Mr. Webb?" she asked, her voice carrying a faint accent Marcus couldn't place. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, but we're closed for the day. We open again tomorrow at 9 if you'd like to come back." "I don't need a tour," she said. "I was here. I was one of the 47. Marcus froze. "You were?" She nodded. "My name is Sarah Martinez. I was 9 years old when the flood came. My parents owned a small farm 15 miles upriver. When the water rose, they put me and my brother on the roof. They promised they'd come back for us." Her voice remained steady, but her eyes glistened. "They never did. The water took them both. I'm so sorry." Sheriff Dalton found us 2 days later, half dead from exposure. He brought us to Mr. Reed. I stayed at the shelter for 5 months. My brother Carlos stayed for 7. Marcus unlocked the door again. "Please come in. I'd love to hear your story." They sat in one of the restored booths, and Sarah Martinez told him everything. How William Reed had sat with her the first night while she cried for her parents. How he'd taught her to make pancakes because she said her mother used to make them every Sunday. How he'd found her a Spanish language book because she was struggling to read in English. How he'd celebrated her 10th birthday with a cake he'd baked himself, decorated with 10 candles, and her name in shaky frosting letters. "He saved my life," Sarah said simply. "Not just from the flood, but from giving up. I wanted to die after I lost my parents. But Mr. Reed, he showed me that life could still have kindness in it, that strangers could become family." "What happened after you left the shelter?" "My aunt in California took me and Carlos. We grew up in Los Angeles. I became a teacher, worked for 38 years in East LA schools. Carlos became a social worker." She smiled. "We both dedicated our lives to helping children, just like Mr. Reed helped us." "Did you ever come back to Ridgewood?" Her smile faded. "Once, in 1972. I wanted to thank Mr. Reed, to show him I'd made something of my life. But when I asked around town, people told me he was gone, ran out of town for kidnapping children." She shook her head. "I tried to tell them the truth, that he'd saved us, not hurt us. Nobody wanted to hear it. They said I was confused, that I was remembering wrong. So I left and never came back. Until now." "Until now." She reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you for proving I wasn't crazy. Thank you for showing the world who William Reed really was." After Sarah left, Marcus sat alone in the diner for a long time. He thought about all the Sarah Martinezes out there, all the children William had saved who'd spent 70 years knowing the truth, but being unable to make anyone believe it. How isolating that must have been. How painful. He understood that pain now. He'd lived it himself. His phone rang. It was Gerald Whitmore. "Marcus, I have news. The Montana Historical Society wants to give William Reed a posthumous commendation. They're talking about a state marker for the diner and possibly including his story in the state history curriculum." Marcus felt a swell of emotion. "That's incredible. There's more. Remember Arthur Kemp III? His company is donating $50,000 to establish a scholarship fund in William Reed's name for foster children pursuing education." "Kemp is doing that?" "He said his daughter asked him to. She toured the museum with her school class, came home, and told him his grandfather had done something terrible and he needed to make it right." Marcus laughed, the sound coming out half as a sob, out of the mouths of babes. "Indeed, the scholarship announcement will be at the Montana Foster Care Association conference next month. They want you to speak." Me? I'm not a public speaker, Gerald. You're the man who uncovered the truth. Your voice matters. Think about it. After he hung up, Marcus walked down into the shelter room. He did this often now, standing among the names and drawings, feeling the weight of history and hope intermingled. His eyes fell on a drawing he'd looked at 100 times but never really seen. It showed a man with an apron standing in front of a diner, arms outstretched, and around him were dozens of stick-figure children holding hands. At the top, in a child's careful writing, "Mr. Reed catches us when we fall." Marcus took a photo and texted it to Gerald with a message, "I'll speak at the conference." The next few weeks brought changes Marcus hadn't anticipated. His auto repair shop, which had been dying before he bought the diner, suddenly had more business than he could handle. People went out of their way to bring their cars to him, saying they wanted to support a man of integrity. Ethan's experience at school transformed completely. The kids who'd bullied him now competed to be his friend. Teachers treated Marcus with new respect at parent conferences. The principal, Gloria, pulled him aside one day and apologized for suspending Ethan, admitting she should have investigated the context more thoroughly. "I let fear drive my decision," she said. "Just like this town did with William Reed. I'm sorry." Marcus accepted her apology with grace, but privately he wondered how many other people had been destroyed by fear-driven decisions that were never corrected, never apologized for, never made right. One evening, Marcus came home to find Ethan at the kitchen table surrounded by poster boards and markers. "What's all this?" Marcus asked. "History Fair project. I'm doing it on William Reed and the 1953 flood. Mr. Patterson said it might be good enough for the state competition." Marcus sat down, looking at Ethan's work. His son had created a timeline, gathered photographs, printed excerpts from the registry. In the center was a photo Marcus had taken of the shelter room, with a quote overlaid, "Heroes aren't always recognized in their time, but truth eventually finds the light." "You wrote that?" Marcus asked. Ethan shrugged, embarrassed. "It's kind of cheesy, I know." "It's perfect," Marcus said, his voice thick. "Your mum would be so proud of you." Ethan looked up, and for the first time in 3 years, he smiled at the mention of his mother without pain clouding his eyes. "I think she'd be proud of both of us, Dad." The Montana Foster Care Association conference was held in Helena in mid-April. Marcus drove up the night before, staying in a modest hotel and rehearsing his speech until the words lost all meaning. He'd never been comfortable speaking in front of crowds. Give him an engine to rebuild and he could work miracles, but put him on a stage and he turned into a stammering mess. The conference hall was packed with social workers, foster parents, state officials, and foster youth. Marcus sat in the front row, palms sweating, as various speakers discussed policy changes and program improvements. Then the moderator introduced him. "Our next speaker needs little introduction. His work uncovering the William Reed shelter has reminded us all why we do this difficult work. Please welcome Marcus Webb." The applause was warm, but Marcus barely heard it over the pounding of his heart. He walked to the podium, looked out at 300 expectant faces, and froze. Then he saw her. Sarah Martinez, sitting in the third row, smiling encouragingly. He took a breath and began. 6 months ago, I stopped on a highway to help a crying child. Her family accused me of being a predator. The town I'd lived in my whole life turned on me. I lost my business, my reputation, and almost lost my faith in humanity. The room was silent. I bought an abandoned diner for $1,200 because I needed a fresh start and couldn't afford anything else. And beneath that diner, I found a room that changed everything. A room that had been sealed for 45 years, hiding the truth about a man named William Reed. Marcus told them the story. All of it. The flood, the children, the accusations, the cover-up, the 70 years of injustice. He told them about finding the registry, about Emma Hartley's lifetime of trying to clear her father's name, about the impossible coincidence that the child he'd helped was descended from a child William had saved. William Reed died believing the world thought he was a monster, Marcus said, his voice breaking. He died alone, disgraced, destroyed for doing the right thing. And for 70 years, the children he saved carried the truth but couldn't make anyone listen. He paused, gathering himself. I'm standing here today because I refuse to accept the false narrative, because I dug until I found the truth. And I'm asking each of you to do the same in your work. Don't accept the easy story. Don't let good people be destroyed by assumptions and fear. Fight for the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because somewhere out there is another William Reed, another person doing the right thing at great personal cost, another hero nobody recognizes, and they're counting on us to see them, to believe them, to fight for them. He looked directly at Sarah Martinez. The children of the 1953 flood couldn't change history, but we can. We can make sure no more heroes die in disgrace. We can make sure truth matters more than convenience. The applause started slowly, then built until the entire room was standing. Marcus saw tears on faces throughout the crowd. Social workers and foster parents, people who understood sacrifice, who knew what it meant to fight for children nobody else wanted. After the speech, people lined up to shake his hand, to tell him their stories, to thank him. A young woman in her 20s approached, holding a folder. Mr. Webb, my name is Jessica Torres. I was in foster care for 12 years. I'm now getting my master's in social work because someone like William Reed believed in me when I was 14 and had nowhere to go. She opened the folder. Inside was a scholarship application. The William Reed Memorial Scholarship. I'm applying, and I wanted you to know what it means. Not just the money, though that helps, but the message that someone remembers, someone cares, someone believes kids like me are worth investing in. Marcus couldn't speak, just nodded and shook her hand. The scholarship fund announcement came that afternoon. Arthur Kemp III stood at the podium, looking uncomfortable but determined. My grandfather, Arthur Kemp Sr., built much of what makes Ridgewood prosperous today, he began. But he also did something terrible. He destroyed William Reed's life to acquire property. He used fear and false accusations as business tools, and while I can't change what he did, I can try to make amends. He announced not just the $50,000 initial donation, but an endowment that would fund scholarships in perpetuity. Every year, 5 foster youth will receive full college scholarships in William Reed's name, because the best way to honor a man who saved children is to keep saving them. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Marcus saw Kemp's daughter in the audience, a girl of about 13, beaming with pride at her father. Later, as people mingled at the reception, Emma Hartley found Marcus. At 84, she'd made the drive from Billings with her son helping, determined to be present for this moment. My father would be so happy, she said, squeezing Marcus's hand. Not just about the scholarship, though that's wonderful, but about the truth finally being told, about his name being cleared. I wish he could see it, Marcus said. Emma smiled. I think he does. I think he sees all of it, and I think he chose you very carefully. Chose me? To find the room, to tell the story. You're not so different from him, you know. Both accused unjustly, both refused to let bitterness destroy you, both focused on doing right rather than being proven right. She pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Open it when you get home. That night in his hotel room, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Emma Hartley's shaky handwriting. Dear Marcus, my father kept a journal until the day he died. Most of it was mundane, but he wrote one entry the week before his heart gave out. I've never shown it to anyone, but I want you to have it. September 2, 1955. I am dying, the doctors say. My heart is failing, though I suspect it's been failing since the day I left Ridgewood. I have no regrets about helping those children. I would do it again 1,000 times, but I regret that I couldn't fight harder, that I let fear of what they'd do to Emma make me run. Someday, someone will find the shelter room, someone braver than me, someone who won't run, and they'll tell the truth I couldn't defend. I believe this. I have to believe this. Because if I don't, if I die thinking those children's stories will be buried forever, I don't know how to let go. So to whoever you are, the person who finds this room decades from now, thank you. Thank you for being braver than I was. Thank you for finishing what I started. I can rest now, knowing the truth will find its voice. He wrote that, Marcus. He knew you were coming. Maybe not your name, but he knew someone like you existed, someone who would fight. And he was right. Marcus read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. William Reed had died with faith that truth would prevail, and 70 years later, it had. The next morning, Marcus drove home to Ridgewood, but instead of going to his house, he went straight to the diner. He walked down into the shelter room and stood in front of the photograph of William Reed, the only one Emma had of her father, looking happy. "We did it," Marcus said to the photograph. "Your name is clear. Your story is told. The children you saved are being honored, and more children will be helped because of you. You can rest now." He stayed there for a long time, in that underground room where 47 children had found safety, where one man's compassion had created a sanctuary, where truth had waited patiently in the dark until someone was brave enough to turn on the light. When he finally emerged, he found Gerald Whitmore waiting for him upstairs. "Thought I might find you here," Gerald said. "How was Helena?" "Overwhelming, good, important. I have something to show you." Gerald pulled out his phone and opened an email. "This came in this morning. It's from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They want to designate the shelter room as a site of national historical significance." Marcus stared at the screen. "National?" "The story has spread farther than we realized. Newspapers picked it up, then podcasts, then a documentary filmmaker reached out. William Reed's story is resonating with people across the country. It's become a symbol. A symbol of what? Of truth over convenience, of compassion over profit, of one person making a difference even when the whole world tells them to give up." Gerald looked at Marcus meaningfully. "Sound familiar?" Over the next months, the ripple effects continued. The documentary aired on PBS, drawing millions of viewers. Schools across Montana added William Reed's story to their curriculum. The state erected a historical marker on Highway 41 at the exact spot where Marcus had stopped to help Emma Whitmore. The marker read, "Near this site, William Reed operated the Riverside Diner and Emergency Shelter, 1952 to 1955. During and after the catastrophic flood of October 1953, Reed sheltered 47 children, saving countless lives through selfless service. Falsely accused and driven from his home, Reed died in 1955 with his heroism unrecognized. This marker stands as a reminder that truth, though delayed, cannot be permanently buried, and that one person's courage can echo through generations." The dedication ceremony was held on October 15th, the 73rd anniversary of the flood. All 7 surviving children from the shelter attended, now in their late 70s and 80s. They stood together as the marker was unveiled, hands clasped, tears flowing freely. Sarah Martinez spoke for the group. "For 70 years, we carried this truth alone. We tried to tell people, but nobody wanted to listen. Today, finally, the world hears us. Today, finally, Mr. Reed gets the recognition he deserved. And today, we can finally say with voices that will be believed, William Reed was a hero." Little Emma Whitmore, now 8 years old, helped pull the cover from the marker. She read the inscription carefully, then looked up at Marcus. "You found the truth," she said, "just like in the stories where the hero finds the treasure." Marcus knelt down to her level. "The truth was always there, Emma. I just had to be willing to look for it." "Are you a hero too?" He thought about that question. 6 months ago, he would have said no. Heroes were people who did extraordinary things. He'd just stopped to help a kid in the rain. But now he understood that heroism wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, about doing the right thing when it would be easier to look away, about refusing to accept injustice even when fighting it cost you everything. "I think," he said slowly, "that anyone can be a hero. You just have to care more about doing what's right than about what people think of you." Emma nodded seriously, as if he'd shared some great wisdom, then ran off to join her parents. Gerald approached, watching his granddaughter with obvious affection. "She wants to be a detective when she grows up. Says she wants to find more buried truths." The world could use that, Marcus said. The world could use more people like you. Gerald extended his hand. Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for stopping that night, for buying this building, for refusing to let the story stay buried. You didn't just clear William Reed's name, you cleared mine too. Yours? I spent 70 years as Gerald Whitmore, grandson of a woman nobody knew was a hero, great-grandson of a man everyone thought was a criminal. Now I'm Gerald Whitmore, descendant of people who survived because of compassion, because someone chose to help rather than judge. That matters. That changes how I see myself, my family, my purpose. They stood together looking at the historical marker, at the crowd of people gathered to honor a man most had never heard of 6 months ago. Do you ever wonder, Gerald asked, what would have happened if you'd driven past that night, if you hadn't stopped? Marcus had thought about that countless times. Emma would have been fine. Her dad walked back with help 20 minutes later, but I wouldn't have been falsely accused, wouldn't have needed to buy the diner, wouldn't have found the shelter room. So the accusation, as terrible as it was, led to all of this. Yeah. Marcus shook his head at the irony. I lost everything and gained everything at the same time. The documentary filmmaker, a woman named Rachel Kim, interviewed Marcus that afternoon for a follow-up piece. They sat in one of the diner's restored booths while cameras rolled. What's the most important thing you've learned from this experience? She asked. Marcus thought carefully. That the truth is worth fighting for, even when nobody believes you, especially when nobody believes you. Because somewhere, someone needs you to fight. Someone needs you to prove that integrity still matters, that doing the right thing still counts for something. Do you have any regrets? Only one, that William Reed died not knowing he'd be vindicated, that he spent his last months thinking the world had forgotten him and what he'd done. But his daughter knew. Emma Hartley knew. She did, and she never stopped fighting for him even when nobody listened. I think that's the real lesson here. Emma spent 70 years telling the truth, and people dismissed her. But she didn't stop. She kept the shelter room sealed and preserved, kept her father's papers, kept believing that someday someone would care. She's the real hero of this story. The interview aired 2 weeks later as part of a 1-hour special. The final segment showed Marcus and Emma Hartley sitting together in the shelter room, surrounded by the drawings and names of children long grown. Was it worth it? Rachel asked Emma off camera. 70 years of fighting to clear your father's name, knowing you might never succeed. Emma's answer was immediate. Every single day, because truth matters, even if only one person knows it, even if only I knew it. My father was a good man, and I would have carried that truth to my grave if necessary. But now I don't have to. Now the world knows. Now he can finally rest. She looked at Marcus. And now other people who've been wrongly accused have hope. They can look at my father's story and think, maybe someday the truth will come out for me too. Maybe someday someone will fight for me the way Marcus fought for William Reed. The documentary won awards, the shelter museum's visitor numbers tripled, and Marcus found himself at the center of something much larger than he'd ever anticipated. But the moment that meant the most came on a quiet Tuesday evening in November, almost exactly 1 year after he'd bought the diner. Marcus was locking up when a rusty sedan pulled into the lot. An elderly black man stepped out, moving slowly, leaning on a cane. "Mr. Webb?" he called. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, but we're closed. We open tomorrow at 9. I don't need to come inside. I just needed to see it, to see that it's real." Marcus walked over. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "No, but you saved my life." The man extended a shaking hand. "Thomas Jefferson Harris, age 83. I was one of the 47. Marcus shook his hand gently. "Mr. Harris, please come in. I want to hear your story." They sat in the diner, and Thomas told Marcus about being 6 years old when the flood came, about watching his parents drown, about Sheriff Dalton finding him clinging to a tree 3 days later, about William Reed taking him in and keeping him safe for 9 months. "Mr. Reed taught me to read," Thomas said. "My parents couldn't read, and I'd never been to school. But he sat with me every night with picture books, teaching me letters, teaching me words. By the time I left the shelter, I could read basic sentences. That's wonderful. That's not the end. I went into foster care, got placed with a good family in Billings, finished school, got a scholarship to college, became a teacher, taught elementary school for 40 years in Chicago, taught over 3,000 children to read, just like Mr. Reed taught me. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I spent my whole adult life paying forward what he gave me, and I never got to thank him. I came back to Ridgewood in '68 to find him, and people said he was gone, said terrible things about him. I tried to defend him, but I was just a black man in Montana in '68. Nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud. You did what I couldn't. You made them listen. You made them see the truth. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph. This is me and Mr. Reed, taken in March of '54, right before I left the shelter. The photograph showed William Reed kneeling beside a small black child, both of them holding a book, both smiling. On the back, in William's handwriting, Thomas's first book read cover to cover, "The Little Engine That Could. He can do anything he sets his mind to." Marcus's vision blurred. "Mr. Harris, would you be willing to donate this to the museum?" "I'd be honored, as long as you include my story. That Mr. Reed didn't just save my life, he gave me a future. And I made sure 3,000 other children got futures too. That's his legacy. Not just the 47 he saved directly, but all the lives those 47 went on to touch." They talked for 2 more hours. When Thomas finally left, Marcus sat alone in the dark diner and thought about legacy, about how one person's kindness could ripple through generations, creating waves of good that never stopped spreading. He pulled out his phone and called Ethan. "Hey, Dad," his son answered. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, Bud. Everything's good. I just wanted to tell you something." "What?" "Your mom used to say that the meaning of life was making the world a little better than you found it. I never really understood what she meant until now." "And now?" "Now I think she meant that we all have the power to change things. Not everything, maybe. Not even most things. But something. One person. One truth. One act of courage. And if we all do that, if we all refuse to look away from what's right, the world changes." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That's pretty deep for a Tuesday night, Dad." Marcus laughed. "Yeah, well, I met someone tonight who reminded me why this all matters." "The diner?" "Life. Doing the right thing. Not giving up. All of it." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, son." Marcus locked up and drove home through the dark Montana night. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched William Reed walk these roads 70 years ago. The same stars that had watched a man try to do good and get destroyed for it. The same stars that now watched his vindication. At home, Marcus found a letter in his mailbox. No return address, but postmarked from Oregon. Inside was a single page. "Dear Mr. Webb, you don't know me, but my grandmother was Mary Beth Carson, one of the children William Reed sheltered. She died in 2008, but before she passed, she told me about the kind man with the diner who'd saved her when she had nowhere to go. She said she'd tried to tell people, but nobody believed her. She died thinking nobody ever would. I saw the documentary. I saw the truth finally being told. And I wanted you to know that my grandmother's last words to me were, 'Always help children. Always. Because someone helped me when I had nothing, and it made all the difference. I became a pediatric nurse because of her. I've helped thousands of children because William Reed helped her. Thank you for making sure she wasn't crazy. Thank you for proving her story was real. Sincerely, Jennifer Carson, RN." Marcus added the letter to the growing collection at the museum, each one a testament to how far William Reed's compassion had traveled through time. 1 year to the day after the grand opening, the museum held an anniversary celebration. Over 500 people attended. The original 7 survivors were there, along with dozens of descendants of the 47 children. Emma Hartley, now 85, cut the cake. Gerald Whitmore announced that the William Reed Memorial Scholarship had received enough donations to fund 15 scholarships this year instead of 5. People across the country have been moved by this story. he said. They want to be part of honoring a hero. But the biggest announcement came from the governor herself, who'd made the drive from Helena. The state of Montana officially apologizes to William James Reed for the injustice done to him in 1955. We recognize him posthumously with the Montana Medal of Honor for civilian heroism. And we commit that his story will be taught in schools throughout our state, so that future generations learn not just about the heroism of helping others, but about the danger of false accusations and rush to judgment. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Marcus found himself swept up in embraces from people he'd never met, all of them thanking him, all of them saying he'd changed their lives. But it was little Emma Whitmore who said it best. Now 8 years old and wise beyond her years, she climbed onto the stage during the reception and took the microphone. "My name is Emma Whitmore," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I'm named after Emma Rose Whitmore, who was saved by Mr. William Reed when she was my age. When I grow up, I want to be like Mr. Marcus. I want to find truths that people buried. I want to help people who everyone else gave up on. Because that's what heroes do." She looked directly at Marcus. "Thank you for helping me when my dad's car broke. And thank you for teaching me that helping people is always the right thing to do, even when it's hard." Marcus couldn't speak through the lump in his throat, so he just nodded. That night, after everyone had gone home and the diner was dark and quiet, Marcus made one final visit to the shelter room. He stood among the names and drawings, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had changed. A year ago, he'd been a broken man, falsely accused, his reputation destroyed, his future uncertain. Now, he was whole again, not because his name had been cleared, though it had. Not because people apologized, though they did, but because he'd found purpose in fighting for someone else's vindication, meaning in uncovering buried truth, hope in proving that goodness could prevail. He'd bought a condemned diner for $1,200 and found $100 million worth of truth. But more than that, he'd found himself. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. Sometimes you have to be falsely accused to understand the weight of injustice. Sometimes you have to fight for a stranger's honor to reclaim your own. Marcus turned off the lights and climbed back upstairs. As he locked the door and walked to his truck, he looked up at the stars and smiled. William Reed had waited 70 years for justice, but justice, real justice, was worth the wait. Truth had its own timeline, its own way of surfacing at exactly the right moment, finding exactly the right person to carry it forward. Marcus had been that person for William Reed, and someday, somewhere, someone would be that person for someone else. The cycle would continue. Truth would keep finding its champions, and heroes, forgotten or otherwise, would finally get the recognition they deserved. Anyone can be a hero if they're brave enough to stand for truth when everyone else looks away. Anyone can change the world if they refuse to let injustice have the final word. And sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't found in buildings or buried treasure, but in the courage to do what's right when the whole world says you're wrong. As Marcus drove home through the Montana darkness, past the historical marker on Highway 41, past the place where everything had started with a crying child and a choice to stop, he realized something profound. He hadn't saved William Reed's legacy. William Reed had saved his. Because the truest heroes don't seek recognition. They just do what needs to be done and trust that somewhere, somehow, someone will remember. And they were both proof that sometimes the longest wait ends with the sweetest victory. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible true stories are waiting for you. Click to continue the journey with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe truth deserves a voice and heroes deserve to be remembered.